And somehow the keywords to getting this to start was like they say in Yiddish. I think it's a Jewish conspiracy. Okay, let's begin. The Gemara says, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Miyom Tov Arishon Shel Hag. From the first day of the Hag, that's when we start the prayer of Mashiach Baruch Hu.
Where are we?
Yeah, page Bet Amud Bet. Ibai Elahu. The Gemara says, Ibai Elahu Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer asked, Mehecha Gamirla. Where do we learn this idea from? Where do we learn this idea of Mashiach Baruch from? Where does it come from? Milulav Gamarla or Menisu Chamayim Gamarla? If we're going to do this, as we just said, if we're doing this from starting with the first holiday of Sukkot, there has to be a reason why we're doing it on the first holiday of Sukkot, correct? It's not coming from nowhere that it's that day. So what's the proof, what's the reasoning that we give as to why it comes out on that day? Either that could come from Lulav, which is one of the mitzvot that we have on the first day of the holiday, or the Gemara is saying, okay, or the Gemara is saying, we learn it from Nisu Chamayim. In the Bet HaMikdash, one of the things they would do is they would take the water, okay, and they would pour the water on the Mizbeach. That was a part of the process. The Nisu Chamayim was part of the things that they would do in order to be able to get, because it was the day that we're being judged for rain. So that's one of the things that we get done, okay? So says the Gemara, if that's the case, Gamala Milulav, Gamala, if we say, you learn it from Lulav, Gamala Malulav, or just like Lulav, Bayom, Af Haskara, Bayom. So if we're learning it from Lulav, when is the appropriate time to shake Lulav? Do we do shake Lulav in the evening or in the morning? In the morning. So therefore, when will we be saying Nisu Chamayim, right? When will we be saying this Mashiach Baruch? We would say it in the morning. However, what if we learn it from Odilma, or maybe Nisu Chamayim, we learn, or we compare it to the pouring of the waters. Gamala. Ma Nisu Chamayim Me'urta, just like the pouring of the waters is in the evening. And here is just an asterisk. It doesn't mean that we do the Nisu Chamayim specifically in the evening. We actually also do the Nisu Chamayim in the day, right, in the Beit HaMikdash. But the Nisu Chamayim was allowed to be in the evening. If you miss the day, you want to shake Lulav at nighttime, there's no mitzvah at all, okay? Masha'inken, as opposed to Nisu Chamayim, you could do it at night. So since its time was also the night, so therefore Mashiach Baruch should also be started. What time? When would we start Mashiach Baruch? No, in the evening. If you learned it from Nisu Chamayim, when would you learn? You would start in the evening. So the evening prayer of the second holiday, of the first holiday, according to Rabbi Eliezer, that's when we would start saying Mashiach Baruch. Okay? Now, this, by the way, is just a very important thing as well, just to understand in general. Like, where you learn something from carries with it the parameters of what you're learning. So if I'm learning it from Lulav, so it changes the halakha as to it. I'm going to give you an example of this, where we find this in another place in halakha. We were learning about the laws of ma'aser ksafim, of giving 10% of your money to ma'aser. Remember? So the Gemara, there's a machloket in the Rishonim. Where do we learn the halakha of giving 10% from? One opinion is we learn it from the actual case in the Torah of ma'aser. When you count 10% of your wheat, you have to give 10% of your wheat. You leave that 10% for the poor people. Okay? Other opinion is no, we don't learn it from there. We learn it from another of Ma'aseh Ksavim that Yaakov Avinu said, whatever I have, 10%, aser a'aserenu lach. I'm going to give you 10%. Okay. What is a characteristic, a fundamental characteristic in halakha that differentiates where we learn it from? If we learn it from Ma'aser, 10% of your wheat, the halakha of 10% of your wheat goes to whom? To the poor. So you'd only be able to give 10% of your money, as we said when we learned Maaser, to whom? To poor people. You couldn't give it to just a random shul. You can't give it to build a mikveh, because that's not about poor people. Okay? If you learn it from Yaakov Avinu, what does Yaakov Avinu say? Who's he talking to? He's talking to God. He says, if you give me, if you protect me, if you give me what I need, I'll give 10% to you. So it's all matters of spirituality. You see, so the difference in where we learn it from actually carries practical, real-world application to where you apply the halakha to. So here too, if we learn it from Lulav, when would you do Mashiach Baruch? From the morning. If you learn it from Nisu Chamayim, when would you start Mashiach Baruch Geshem from? From the night before. How do we know that it's from the night? That our master taught us, the pasuk says minchatam and their mincha v'niskehem and their libations, the pourings of either water or wine. Afilu balayla. Af haskara, since we learned minchatam niskehem is even in the evening, so too af haskara also mentioning is me'orta from the evening. Tashma, let us come and see. Da'amar Rabbi Avau, lo limdar Rabbi Eliezer ela milulav. Rabbi Eliezer, he learned Mashiv Aruach, the mentioning, he learned it from Lulav. Ika da'amri, other people say, Ika means there is, da'amri, those that say. So there are those that say, Rabbi Avau Gemara Gemila. V'ika da'amri matnita shmiala. So we know that Rabbi Avau says that Rabbi Eliezer learned this law from Lulav. Now, some people say Rabbi Avau, he learned it from somewhere, right? This is what he studied. That's what he understood. And some people say he learned it from a beraita. Maihi, what does that mean? Shmiale, the fact that he heard it. Maihi, where do we learn from? The Tanya, he learned it in a beraita. Me'ematai maskina geshamim. From when do we mention the rains? Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer says, Mishat netilat lulav. From the time of the taking of the lulav. You can't get more clear than that that's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. When do we mention the rain? From when you take the lulav. So you know it's during the day. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, Mishat anahato, from the time that you put it down. So the Braita says similarly to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, Miyom tov harishon shachag, on the first day. But the Braita says it differently. It says, from the time that you take the lulav. Indicating that he was tying Mashiv Ruach to the taking of the lulav. Rabbi Yoshua doesn't say on the last day of the holiday, he says on the day you put it down. So you see that the conversation was revolving around the lulav itself, which would indicate that it would be start from the morning along with the lulav itself. Amar Rabbi Eliezer says, Ho'il ve'abat minin halalu enan ba'in el ratzot alamayim. Since the four species that we bring, they come liratzot alamayim, to find favor in God's eyes for the water. It's an interesting thing. A lot of times we don't think about this. But the arba minim, the four species, what is it? Why is it then? How come? What are we doing? The whole holiday of Sukkot, again, we're in a different society now. But back then, when they lived in agricultural societies, so everything revolved around the time of year that you were in. What was the time of Sukkot? It was the time, the seasons. It was the time when they would bring in all the produce from the fields. Hagasif, exactly. So all of the mitzvot of the holiday revolve around produce. So the four species are four items, four things that grew from the ground. Even the schach is mipsolet goren vayakef. So when they would cut down all the wheat, they would have the top of the wheat that they would use for the food, but they'd have all the stalks sitting there in their threshing floor. They would literally go to, it's so funny to me today that today you go and you spend $1,000 on schach. It was all the garbage for them, all the leftovers of the tree branches that they cut down for the fruits or for whatever that they would have for free. The schach was meant to be something that cost them nothing. Again, it's such an interesting change in our society to theirs. You go out and you spend $200 on a set of 11 etrog. The guy would go to his field, right? He would cut an etrog off of his tree, He would cut one for his kid, for his brother, like this, and he would, everyone would go out and they would cut hadassim, aravot. They had it that it grew in their backyard. All right. So Rabbi Eliezer says.
So if it was today,
yeah,
would it be the same laws?
No, because
would it be the same items used? Because
exactly.
They had it in their backyard, so it was easy for them. They just made it work. Would it be different if it was today?
What do you mean? Would it be different?
Would you need the same?
Would you need the same fruits?
What's it called?
Hadassim, aravot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was easy for them to have it. You said everyone had it.
Okay.
If it was today.
But what does everyone have? Mosquitoes.
No, but it's completely different time.
Yes, it's a completely different time, but the law doesn't change. That's why now that we don't have it, we have to pay someone to bring it. And now that people don't build it. Sorry?
Was it only a law of convenience?
No, it wasn't because it was convenient, but it happened to be convenient. Okay? And I don't know if Mr. Joe Cohen would plant aravot on his land, or if not for the fact that he had the mitzvah. But it was no skin off his back to have in his orchard one tree be an etrog tree. You see my point? Okay? Now, and it's funny, I think there's a lot of mitzvot like that seem to us to be very hard. But when the Torah gave them to us, it gave them to us in a context that was not necessarily hard at all. Okay? Let's move on. So these 4 minim, enan ba'in, they only come l'ratzot al hamayim. Ukishem she'arba minin halalu I efshar bahem belo mayim. Just like these 4 species, they're impossible without water. Kach I efshar le'olam belo mayim. So too, it's impossible for the world to exist without water. And therefore, when we pick up the ulav and etrog, we also pick up this new saying of Mashiach Ruach Moed HaGeshem. Amar Rabbi Yoshua said to him, Ve'alo geshamim b'chag enam, o eno ela siman kilala. Rain, again, remember, the Braita is very similar to the Mishnah because it was a recording of the same conversations, okay?
A Braita is what exactly?
A Braita is basically, imagine back in the day, all that you had was conversations in the Bet Midrash. And everything was handed down from rabbi to student, rabbi to student. Rabbi Yehuda comes along and you weren't even allowed to write anything down. Because Torah shebichtav, the sheba'al peh, there's an isur to write it down. So the Mishnah to write was asur. The Gemara to write down was asur. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda, realizes everything's about to hit the fan, right, with the Romans, and we're going to be exiled, and no one's going to remember anything about Judaism. So what did they do? They instituted something called Et La'asot L'Hashem, Heferu Toratecha. It was a time to act for God. We have to undo your Torah. We have to, so to speak, risk. We need to risk doing something which is asur temporarily in order to keep the Torah alive. And we gave the example of Esther HaMalkah, where she institutes a fast on Purim, and they fast on the night of Pesach. No one eats matzah that night. Why? Because she said, if we don't do this, there won't be any Judaism. No, there won't be another Pesach. Okay? Mutav shehalelu Pesach achat. Better that they should contravene one Pesach. V'ayichalu Pesachim arbeh. That they shouldn't ruin or throw away all the Pesachim. Okay? So Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, he gathered together all these conversations with all the different opinions, and he codified it into a Mishnah, using the notes, if you will, of Rabbi Meir. Stam Mishnah, a regular Mishnah with no author, was written by Rabbi Meir. Okay? So once we know that, we understand that there was also parallel recordings, if you will, for people's personal use, not for anything else, and those were considered the Braitot. So you had to know all the Mishnayot. Not everyone knew all the Braitot. Okay? Amar lo, so Rabbi Yoshua says, like we remember, it's a sign of curse. Amar lo, Rabbi Eliezer says, I also said not to ask for rain, to mention it. Just like we mentioned Techiyat HaMetim the whole year, now we throw in an extra tidbit here. Just like you say, thank you Hashem, please, revive all the dead, all the great-grandparents, all the great tzaddikim of the past, right? Right after we say Mashiach, we say you are trustworthy to revive all the dead. Just like we say Techiyat HaMetim the whole year, ve'ena ela bizmana, when we mean that that's going to happen only when the time of Mashiach comes. So we're mentioning it, even though it's only going to happen when Hashem wants it to happen in the right time. We also mention the power of God in bringing rain, but they only really come, and they're only supposed to come in their correct time. Therefore, if you want to say Mashiach Ruach the whole year, technically you could. Rebbe says, Omer ani, I say, Misha'ah shemafsik l'she'elah, kach mafsik lehaskara. From the time that you stop asking for rain, in other words, in the summer, kach mafsik, there also you stop lehaskara. Now, I want you to look for 1 second over here. Where is it? Rashi. Misha'ah sheposek melishol. Can you see across? Right over here, about midway through the page in Rashi. You see the bolded words, Misha'ah sheposek? Shebepesach, posek milomar v'ten tal matar. On Pesach, you stop asking for rain. Posek mila'askir gvurot geshamim. At that moment, that's when you stop mentioning Mashiach Ruach. V'hashta, lo matzit lemema, you cannot say, im ba la'askir kol hashana kula maskir, that if you want to say Mashiach Ruach the whole time, the whole year, you could say it. Ela bi'imot hachama, eno maskir. But during the days of the summer, you don't mention. Ho'il velo siman berachahen. They are not a sign of blessing. So Rabbi Yehuda is doing similarly, is he's taking the idea of Rabbi Yoshua, which says that if it rains in the time of Sukkot, that's considered a kilala, right? Because you're being chased in the sukkah. So Rabbi Yehuda in the Braita is saying back to this idea that's being put forth with Rabbi Eliezer. Like if I wanted to say Mashiv HaRuach the whole year, I could say it. Just like we say Techiyat HaMetim the whole year. And it's only happening Bismana, in its time, with the coming of the Mashiach. Amen. Okay? So Rabbi Yehuda's rebuttal is, what are you talking about? In the summer, if it was to rain, that would be a sign of Kilala. Because if it rains in the summer, when the fruits and the vegetables and everything needs to grow in the sun, they need the sun at that stage of their growth. They don't need the rain. Rain at that time destroys the crops. So it doesn't make any sense, Rabbi Yehuda says, to be mentioning it during the time when you're supposed to stop. So he's really saying almost like the inverse of Rabbi Yehoshua, where he talks about not mentioning on Sukkot. He says you shouldn't mention it all throughout the summer.
What does Rabbi Yehuda say? Where is Rabbi Yehuda?
Rabbi Yehuda is in the Braita. Okay, did you see Rabbi Yehuda? Omer Ani. You see it? Rabbi Omer Ani. It's right under the word, like you see Tosafot HaOver.
Yeah.
Go to the left, 2 lines down.
Got ya.
Rabbi Omer.
Braita, once again, is like a personal notebook, not a public notebook.
It wasn't like a officially compiled and put out set of Mishnayot.
Everyone has their own Mishnayot that they've written down. And
No, the Mishnayot were codified,
and everyone had access to it.
and they had the same one, everyone.
And Braita was like a personal library that someone brought to the conversation. And
Or-
said, hey,
yeah.
I have this in my library.
Or that they were taught, in the Bet Midrash, etc. Okay.
Right.
It's like
So-
Jonah's notes after this session.
So not everyone, and this is the point, not all of the Tanaim knew or had access to all the Braitot. And that's why you'll find sometimes the guy will say, there's a Braita that I have, like, I received this learning, Kach Mikublani, this is what I learned from my rabbi, Tanya, the Braita says, etc., etc.
Does it hold the same weight as a Mishnah?
So it's like as an example, it's the same time frame as a Mishnah, it's the same validity as a Mishnah, but it doesn't have the weight of the fact that Rabbi Yehuda chose which Mishnayot to include. So it's almost like there's an extra stamp of approval on a Braita that became a Mishnah. Okay? All right. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera Omer, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says, B'sheni b'chag u'maskir. If we didn't have enough opinions yet, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says, no, not on the first day. When do we do it? On the second day of the holiday. That's when we start mentioning the Mashiv HaRuach. Rabbi Akiva Omer, we'll see exactly why, everybody. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says, Bashishi b'chag u'maskir. On the 6th day of the holiday. How many opinions we have now? Rabbi Eliezer says day 1. Rabbi Yoshua says last day. It seems like Rabbi Yehuda seems to be, at least from now, aligned with Rabbi Yoshua. We'll come back and see if that's the case, okay? Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera comes and says, nope, number 2 day. The last opinion of Rabbi Kiva says 6th day. So far, how many opinions do we have? At least 4 clear opinions to say Mashiv HaRuach on the first day, Rabbi Eliezer. On the second day, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera. On the 6th day, Rabbi Akiva. And on the last day is Rabbi Yoshua, who says on the last day of the Hag. Okay?
7 days, yeah?
Sorry?
7 days?
There's 7 days, but then there's Shemini Atzeret.
So when he said the last day, what day was he talking about?
So last day, again, from what we learned up until now, was Shemini Atzeret.
But is this
Okay.
like Chutz La'aretz? Is this like,
Oh, this is all Israel.
Assume it's only 7 days total. Okay. So this
Yeah.
would be Chol HaMoed.
No, there's even in Israel there's 8 days.
So 8 days.
Shemini Atzeret is not Shvi'i Atzeret
No,
in
it's
Israel.
it's a new holiday.
It's a new holiday, but they also have a day, so in other words, you have the first day and the 7th day are holidays in the Torah. And then there's an 8th day.
But the 8th day is Shmini Atzeret.
But all 7 days you carry the lulav.
Right. The 7 days Hoshana Rabbah.
So, right, but that's, Hoshana Rabbah is not
It's not a chag.
expression in Torah, okay? So 7th day, Hoshana Rabbah is the day that leads into the 7th day of the holiday, right? But the 7th day of the holiday is from the Torah. So Sukkot is different than Pesach. Sukkot has, we don't experience this because in the way that we have holidays, it doesn't work that way. But as an example, Pesach, you have the first day of the holiday and the seventh day of the holiday. Sukkot, you have the first day of the holiday and the seventh day of the holiday and the eighth day of the holiday.
Yeah.
You understand?
We don't keep 2 days of that holiday. though.
Because of the Sveka de Yoma. Because we're not going to double. Because of the suffix of the day, we're not going to make you do it twice and twice.
In Israel.
Here.
In Israel, they only have Shemini Atzeret and Simchat Torah as one day.
1 day.
But here, if you do the Shmini Atzeret as a second holiday, and you do the double like we do everything else, then
You
you'd
have 4
have
days.
four.
No,
then
but
you'd
I
have-
understand that.
yeah.
But what I'm saying is that in Israel, you don't keep 2 days of Chag in a row for the 7th day.
You have the Shivi'i, the seventh day of the holiday, which is Hag Sukkot, and then you go into Shemini Atzeret.
And there's 2 days in a row that they keep.
No,
No, they keep 1 day.
they keep one
How
day.
does that work?
Because, again, because of Sefek de Yoma.
They're not
Well,
doing like that.
no, it's going to confuse. Okay, let's move on. So last day of the holiday, according to Rabbi Yoshua. So we have so far how many days? 1, 2, 6, 7. Those are the opinions that we have on the table. Okay. Mishum, right, Maskir. Rabbi Yehuda. Mishum Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Rabbi Yoshua Omer. Ha'over l'fnei ha'teva b'yom tov ha'acharon. We've seen this already. The Chazan who goes on the last day of the holiday, ha'acharon in Musaf Maskir, he mentions Mashiva Ruach. Harishon, the guy in Shacharit, eno Maskir. He doesn't mention. B'yom tov rishon shel Pesach, in the first day of Pesach, Harishon Maskir, the first one mentions the holiday, the Gishamim, because it's still the winter time. Ha'acharon eno Maskir. Again, the switch over happens on Musaf on the first day of Pesach. Shapir ka'amar le Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Eliezer said well to Rabbi Yoshua his answer, right? I didn't say that you're asking. I just said that you're mentioning it, right? So his point, the Gemara says now, is well taken. Amar lecha Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Yoshua says, how could you compare? You're comparing Techiyat HaMetim, which you say in the Amidah, which is only in its time. So therefore, also you can mention Mashiva Ruach, even if it's the timing is not then, is not exactly then. Amar lecha Rabbi Yoshua. The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yoshua would say to you, Bishlemat Techiyat HaMetim. By Techiyat HaMetim, Maskir, you mentioned the Kule Yom Zimnehu. Even if today is not the coming of the Mashiach, today could be the coming of the Mashiach. So on every day, could Techiyat HaMetim happen today? It could. So therefore, you can't say that Techiyat HaMetim, there's ever a day that isn't the day, which is its time. Do you understand? So Rabbi Eliezer said, look, just so you say Techiyat HaMetim, even though it's only when Mashiach comes. Yeah, but maybe Mashiach's coming today. Yeah, good answer. Okay? The kul is yom zimnehu. Ela geshamim. But when it comes to rain, kol ema de'atyan zamenayui is when rain comes, whenever it comes, that's its time. There's times when you don't want rain, i.e. on the holiday of Sukkot, i.e. during the summer months. V'hatenan yatsa Nisan. We've learned in the Mishnah, yatsa Nisan, if Nisan went out, v'yardu geshamim, and it started to rain, siman kilalahem. After Nisan, so what's Nisan? Nisan is the month of Pesach. After Pesach, when you're in the time leading up to the Sfirat HaOmer leading to Shavuot, if it rains after Nisan, it's a sign of Kilala. Our rabbis tell us that this idea of Siman Kilala, or Siman Kilala on Sukkot, is not in New York. It's not in Canada. It's not in other countries. In our countries, we're actually used to having rain on Sukkot. We're used to having rain all throughout the summer. It's only in Israel that has an extremely regulated climate where everything actually is set, and they can bank on the fact that it's now not going to rain for 6 months. Like that's like a thing that you could have in Israel. So if that's the case, so Yatsa Nisan v'Yardu Geshamim Siman Kilalayim. Therefore, it's not the right time for the rain. You could say about a day that today is not the time. Shne'emar, like it says in the pasuk, Halo Kitzir Hitim Hayom. You see that he says in the pasuk. If you look in the pasuk, it's brought down on the side. Halo Kitzir Hitim Hayom. Ekra el Adonai v'ten kolot umatar ure'u kira'atam rabah asher asita b'nei Hashem l'sh'ol lachem melech. Shmuel says, let me show you You, you asked for a king, correct? They came and asked Shemuel, the Navi, the prophet. They said, we want a king like everybody else. Shemuel said, this request for a king is not coming from the right place. He says, and I want to prove to you that what you did was wrong. Isn't today a day where we're supposed to be cutting the wheat? In other words, it's that time of year. Let me show you how that you're wrong, because it's going to rain now. So you see, it was an illustration of the fact they did something wrong, and they're being punished, or they're being cursed. The rain coming not in the correct time is considered a kilala. Okay? Brings it from the pasuk. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera Omer. Just by the way, important always. In those words, halok etzihitim ayom. You see those three letters after that? Vav, Gimel, Vav. What does that stand for, Harry? Vegomer or Vegomre. All right? Or you see Vav, Chaf, Vav, which means Vechulu. Right? Etc. Oftentimes, unless you go and look at the pasuk or you see what Rashi explains, you're not sure how that pasuk proves the point, because it's just quoting you the beginning of the pasuk. They took for granted that everyone knows the rest of the pasuk, right? Okay, fine. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera Omer. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says, "B'sheni b'chag," on the second day umaskir. My ta'amad Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera. Where did Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera? Where did he pull that rabbit out from? Like, we're going to do it on the second day of the holiday. What does that have to do with anything? The Tanya, the Braita says, Yehuda ben Betera Omer, Ne'emar b'sheni v'niskehem, v'ne'emar b'shishi unsachea, v'ne'emar b'shivi'i kimishpatam. Harei mem yud mem. Harei kan mayim. Mikan remez, v'nisucha mayim min haTorah. Now, this is fascinating.
Really fascinating.
This is fascinating. Like I told you, he's pulling a rabbit from his hat. It's literally like a code.
Said the second day?
Yeah, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera. It's literally like some sort of code that they would, use during the war to communicate, right, with the Nazis. That all these codes that they were cracking during World War II. Yeah. They would send letters like, "I need milk from the market," and you knew that you count 3 letters in, 4 letters this way, 6 letters that way. And that's how you got the coded message. So the Torah also has these messages Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera is telling us. He says, if you take a look, on the second day, when the pasuk is describing all the korbanot for each day, the first day of the holiday, second day of the holiday, he says, look, in the second day of the holiday, it says, v'niskehem. It says, and their libations, the pouring of the water. So it adds, instead of saying unsacheha, which means and its libations, it says uniskehem, and their libations. There's an extra mem. On the 6th day of the holiday, unsachea, it adds the word unsachea. So you have over there instead of viniska, it says unsachea. What's the extra letter? Viniska and unsachea. The difference is yud. So yud. So in the first word viniskehem, it could have said unsachea, and it said niskehem. The second time it says v'niska. It says instead on the 6th day unsachea, extra yud. V'ne'amar b'shvi'i, and it says on the 7th day ki mishpatam. It doesn't say kam mishpat like it says in other places according to the law. It says ki mishpatam according to their laws. It gives you an extra mem. Gives you an extra mem. So what are you left with? An extra mem. Give me a mem. Give me a yud. Give me a mem. What does that spell? Mayim. Right? So the Torah hinted to you the letter is water. Where did it start the secret code?
Second day.
On the second day. Therefore, since it's tied to the sucha mayim, that wild, it's literally a rabbit out the hat. Okay? Here we see a hint to the law of pouring the water in the Torah, the water that they would pour in the Beit HaMikdash from the Torah. Okay? Yeah?
Now that we just went full circle, can you go back? Because I missed the first.
I could go back, but that would take us back to the same place because it's a circle. Wait! Sorry. Good. What's the question?
Could we go back to where it starts on the second day?
Where he proves it?
Yeah.
Okay. Go back to that. My Ta'amad Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera. What's the reason Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera? The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera Omer, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says, Ne'emar b'sheni, it says on the second day of the holiday, V'niskehem.
1 minute.
See the last word on the line, 5 lines from the bottom.
Okay.
V'niskehem.
Okay.
It could have said, Unsacheha.
Why could it have said that?
Because in other days, it says, on that place, it says unsachea.
Okay.
And it would mean the same thing. So it
Got it.
added v'niskehem.
Okay.
So extra mem.
Got it.
V'ne'emar b'shishi, on the sixth day, it says unsacheha. Following next line.
Okay.
On the sixth day, it says unsachea. And in other places, it said v'niska. So which letter did it add in extra? Yud. Unsacheha. You see the yud?
Yeah.
And on the seventh day, it says kimishpatam. According to their laws. You could have said kamishpat. So what did it add? Added a mem. Hare mem, yud, mem. Hare kan mayim.
But everyone had Venice Keha, no?
What do you mean everyone having a scale?
Every pasuk also had the yud? Or no? This is the
So
first-
no, in only on these 3 days do you find this aberrative language. Okay? So therefore it's illustrating to you that we're getting this hint that there's an obligation to do the nisuch hamayim, to pour the waters. Okay? Now let's look at Rashi for 1 minute, okay? Rashi on the left side, Besheni v'niskehem. You see it?
Yes.
Rashi says, Disagi b'niska, because it could have said b'niska. So what did it add? Okay? It added the word, Yudav Hivat de Besheni, Ayatir Mem Lidrasha. Since on the second day, it added the extra Mem Lidrasha, it's coming to tell you to learn something from it. Lahachi matchilin lehaskir b'sheni. So just as the Torah started to mention Mayim on which day? The second day. So too, we start to mention the water on the second day of the holiday.
So do days 6 and 7 have any significance other than finishing spelling the word Mayim?
According to Rabbi Yehuda Mitera, no.
Okay.
Stanna, because that's you're on Ketone Pasim, strikes again. Umayshna b'sheni, and why is the second day different? Dinakat, that it says D'chi remizi luhu b'kra b'sheni hu d'remizi hilkach b'sheni matkirinan. So how come only on the second did it start hinting to you this word? Therefore, it's coming to tell you that we're going to also, therefore we also mention, since the Torah chose the second day to start the code, that's the day we say it on. Rabbi Akiva Omer b'shishi, on the sixth day, b'chag u'maskir, on the sixth day of the holiday, Shnei Amar b'shishi unsacheha.
So he goes to the same word also.
He goes to the same word also, and he picks the sixth day. Why? B'sheni nisuchin hakatuv medaber echad nisuch hamayim ve'echad nisuch hayayin. The pasuk in the first one, which is the second day of the holiday, says niskehem, which is its libations. There's 2 libations that you do. One of the wine, because they used to pour wine with the korbanot also on the mizbeach, but that they would do all year round. Nisuch hamayim was only, pouring of the water was only on the holiday of Sukkot. So Rabbi Akiva says on the second day, when it says v'niskehem, it refers to multiple libations, the water and the wine. That doesn't illustrate something which is unique or special only to Sukkot, because it has the wine also. But the second day, maybe both of them are chamra, both of the 2 are wine. Sorry, excuse me. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva goes to the 6th day, which is the first day that you find viniskeha, which means, and it's one pouring. It's the one which illustrates only the water. And since that's the first time that we only talk about the water, that's the day that is more connected only to water. Okay? See, Rabbi Akiva is like, I see what you say, I like it, I see you, I raise you. Okay? So Rabbi Akiva says on the sixth day. Ve'ema teravayu dechamra sava lakibu. Maybe we should say, and this is a little complicated. Okay, let's look at Rashi again. B'shnei nisuchin hakatuv medaber shnei nisuchin al korban echad. Aval, right, 2 pourings on 1 korban. Aval v'niskehem mashma harbe de bekorbanot harbe. Lachen lo havi darish Rabbi Akiva v'niskehem. Rabbi Yehuda says this is referring to multiple korbanot, multiple nisuchim, so therefore we're not going to touch it. Plural, okay? Ve'ema tarvayu dechamra, and let's say that both of them are chamra. Let's say both of the nisuchim are wine. Hold on one second. Let me just see. how he's following here. Right, the ema, let's say that both of these, because you mentioned one a pouring and you mentioned another pouring. How do you know any of them are water? Maybe they're both wine. Savalak Yehuda ben Betera, he holds like Yehuda ben Betera, the Amar Remizi Maya. The water is hinted by these three extra letters of Maya. Yeah. So we don't have the next page. We're going to continue, but the Gemara is then going to continue and say, well, if it's a remez, why does he hold the sixth day? And then the Gemara is going to come back and say what we said before, that he chooses the sixth day because it's the one that focuses on the water. Okay, so let's try just now and review. I forgot last time, and last time I turned it off for the review part. Okay, let's just go through the review one more time of the whole daf. By the way, it's amazing if we could keep a pace like this, where we're doing almost an amud each time we study. That would be incredible.
We could do a whole daf.
Sorry?
We could do a daf for 30 minutes only, no?
No, it'll be like an hour, 15.
I'm saying now we're at 30, right?
It was 36, but maybe, I don't know. Okay, maybe it could be.
So
Okay?
shorter anyway, so.
So let's kind of go through the Gemara in a nutshell one more time. What's it called, remember? When we go back and forth, when they give the back and forth the Gemara, it's called Shakla Vitaria. Shakla means literally means the give and take of the daf. So let's go through one more time. The Gemara basically asks a question. Rabbi Eliezer, when he learns his halakha about the first day, where does he learn it from? Does he learn it from the lulav, or does he learn it from nisuch hamayim? The Gemara says, who cares? What's the difference? The Gemara answers, well, if it learns it from the lulav is only in the day, which would mean that you would start saying Mashiva Ruach during the daytime, in Shacharit. But if you learned it from nisuch hamayim, one would be allowed to pour the water even in the night, even though we do it during the day, but you're allowed to do it in the evening. So if that's the case, says the Gemara, then we would learn that you should start saying Mashiva Ruach from Arbit the night before. Which, by the way, if you remember, when we first started learning this, someone asked, how come every time we start everything, we start it in the night? Why would we start it in the morning? We should start it the night before. And the Gemara is going to get more into that in a little bit. The Gemara continues and says, we learn from the Braita that the Braita says specifically that Rabbi Eliezer connected it. We said in the name of Rabbi Avahu. Rabbi Avahu learned it from a Braita, and the Braita Rabbi Avahu saw that Rabbi Eliezer ties it to specifically to Mishat Nitilat Lulav, from the time where you take the Lulav. Rabbi Yehoshua ties it back and he says that it's from the time that you drop the Lulav. What does Rabbi Eliezer explain? He explains that the idea of the four species, the idea of the whole holiday is Leratzot Alamayim, comes to praise God, to find favor in Hashem's eyes with regards to the water. Just as the water, you can't have the four minim without water. Also, you can't have the world can't exist without water. So therefore, we mention it. So the Gemara asks the question, like it asked last time as well. What do you mean? It's a sign of a kilala. Rabbi Eliezer says, what do you mean? I didn't say to ask for it. I just said to mention it. And just like you can mention it with Techiyat HaMetim, which at any time is we're allowed to mention, even though it only is going to happen during the time of Mashiach. So too, you could also mention this in its time. You can mention it any time. Rebbe says, I say that from the time that you stop saying, you ask and you mention at the same time. Because why? Because mentioning rain during the time of the summer, even if you're only mentioning it and not asking for it, is inappropriate because it's a siman kilala. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera then adds his new opinion of the second day. Rabbi Akiva adds his opinion of the sixth day. Mishum Rabbi Yehoshua Omer, Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua said what we said in the Mishnah about the person switching over in Musaf and not in Shacharit, both on the holiday of Sukkot to switch to rain, and on the holiday of Pesach to switch out of rain. Ask the Gemara, 1 second. Now let's go back to the Braita. It seems like Rabbi Eliezer has a great point. What's Rabbi Yehoshua going to answer him? Because he says you could say Techiyat HaMetim at all times. Rabbi Yehoshua's answer is, what are you talking about? Techiyat HaMetim, even though it's going to happen in time of Mashiach, it could happen on any day. So therefore, every day is potentially the time of Techiyat HaMetim. Whereas with rain, it's not the case. Because with rain, it's only a siman it's a siman. It's a siman kilala if it comes in the wrong time. Ask the Gemara, how do we know it's a siman kilala? Brings the Mishnah, where the Mishnah says that once Nisan leaves, rain comes, siman kilala. Where do we prove it from? The pasuk says that Shemuel said when the Jewish people asked for a king, he said you're doing the wrong thing. And how do I prove it? You're doing the wrong thing. Look, isn't today the day where you're supposed to cut the wheat? Look, I'm going to show you it's going to rain today. And that's going to be a sign that God is not happy with your ways, which illustrates it's a siman kilala. Ask the Gemara, where did Yehuda ben Betera get his halacha that you should do it on the second day? Answer the Gemara, secret code. It says in the pasuk, v'niskehem, extra mem. It says in the second day. On the sixth day it says, unsachea, when it could have said v'niska, extra yud. It says on the seventh day, kimishpatam, according to their laws. It could have said kamishpat, extra mem. Mem, yud, mem, arekan, maim. You have the word maim. When did it choose to start mentioning this day? It started to mention it on the second day. Since it started mentioning on the second day, Yehuda ben Betera says, we started the secret code of the word maim on the second day, which alludes to nisuch hamayim, to the pouring of the wine. Therefore, also, I'm telling you that that it should be on the second day. Rabbi Akiva comes along, and now Rabbi Akiva needs to justify why he says on the sixth day. Answers the Gemara, what do you mean? The pasuk Rabbi Akiva brings down on the sixth day of the holiday. It says unsachea. It says earlier many. It says over here only one. So if it says over here only one, so that's how I know on this day, on the day that it only says one, that's going to be the day that I'm going to learn nisuch hamayim from, and therefore attached to it mentioning the water. Ask the Gemara, 1 second, Rabbi Akiva. Maybe now it says, and you pour, it could also still mean that it's talking about the wine. How do you know it's talking about the water? Answers the Gemara, no. Rabbi Akiva says, I also hold of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera's code. Mayim, mem, yud, mem. I just don't follow the first one, mem, because that one is on a day where it mentions it in plural. But over here where it's talking about the specific nitzacheh of this korban, therefore that one I know is talking about the viniska, the vinsacheh of the mayim, and therefore I choose to begin saying it on the sixth day. That's the shakla v'tarya of Bet Amud Bet. Wow. Guys, if you review this a few times, there'll come a point where we could literally rattle off the whole masechet.
This is a Masechet Taanit.
Masechet Taanit.
Isn't Taanit fast?
Excellent question. You missed the introductory class.
Okay.
Okay? I'll give you the answer. Okay, I'm gonna